My only copy. So there were two Pakistani representatives. The one was supposed to be delayed, and then his surrogate was supposed to turn out. But now the surrogate hasn't turned up as well. So this is a bit off.
Yeah, because he would also be part of the view, right?
Yeah.
He was supposed to deliver something.
But they're having a little powwow there. I hope somebody communicates something to me at some point.
Yeah.
Three minutes. You know what's going to happen, eh? At some point, they're all going to just walk in.
Hope so. Is the ambassador of Pakistan?
Come, you have to come. Don't give signs. You've got to come and tell me who's coming.
He's here?
Yeah, he's here.
So what is the name
So
of
which
the
one is it?
Alternate, the alternate person.
The name.
Alternate Idris.
Address, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Mohammed Idris.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so Hayat is not here.
No.
Okay, all right, good. I'll just get my signal from Madhu. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Police Lieutenant General Nadipet Sadiwong, Vice Minister for Interior, the Royal Thai Government, Mr. Mohammed Idris, Member of the National Disaster Management Authority, Government of Pakistan, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, and Ms. Tiziana Bonapace, Director of Information Communication Technology and Disaster Risk Reduction Division. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to welcome you to the fifth session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. It is indeed my honor to invite the Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, to deliver her welcome remarks.
Good morning to everybody. Let me recognize His Excellency Nandapet Nitwong's Vice Minister for the Interior, Royal Thai Government, His Excellency Lieutenant General Omar Mahmood Hayat, Chairman of National Disaster Management Authority of Government of Pakistan, who should be joining us shortly. And we have currently at the podium Mr. Mohammed Idris Masood, member of the Disaster Risk Reduction, National Disaster Management Authority of Government of Pakistan, who, in case Lieutenant General Omar Mahmood Hayat is delayed, he will present his remarks. Distinguished delegates, our members here, ladies and gentlemen, 2017 has been another year where once again we have witnessed tragic disasters. Typhoon Hato cut across Hong Kong, and Macau, and then stretched all the way to Vietnam. Torrential monsoon rains descended on Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. Tropical cyclones Harvey, Irma, and Maria hit the Caribbean and southern parts of the United States. Mexico suffered an earthquake which registered 7.1 Richter scale. Too many lives have been lost again. The devastating scale of the damage and its impact on livelihoods and the global economy cannot be understated. It has reversed development gains and jeopardized the outcome of many years of work by communities, governments, and development organizations. The 2030 Sustainable Development Goals recognizes the ravaging and all-pervasive impacts natural disasters can have. They incorporate the principle of disaster risk resilience, so central to the broader objective of leaving no one behind. Disaster resilience approaches, frameworks, and tools must protect everyone, including those who live in the so-called last mile, those who are vulnerable and digitally disconnected. Protecting livelihoods from the impact of disasters must move up the policy agenda. There has to be a recognition that even the most efficient early warning systems may not alone be enough, as disasters can strip poor people of their livelihoods, push them back into absolute poverty, or trap families in poverty over generations. Innovative sources of disaster risk financing are therefore essential to support early warning systems and to build resilience. Allow me to, at least for my part of the remarks, focus on 3 insights and provide 2 policy proposals from the upcoming 2017 Asia-Pacific Disaster Report called the APDR, which will then be presented, of course, by Tiziana, the Director of Disaster Risk Reduction and ICT Division. So my first point is, as the region continues to develop quickly, risk appears to be outpacing resilience. The greatest impacts of disasters are in countries which have the least capacity to prepare or respond to them effectively. Between 2000 and 2015, the low and the lower middle income countries in the region experienced almost 15 times more disaster-related deaths than the region's high-income countries. Beyond the terrible human cost, our research indicates that over the SDG implementation period, 40% of global economic losses from disasters will be in Asia and the Pacific, while the region accounts for around 36% of global GDP. The greatest burden of losses will be borne by small island developing states with average annual losses of close to 4% of their GDP. The least developed countries are expected to bear annual losses of around 2.5% of GDP. Second, the poorest and most vulnerable people are disproportionately affected by these losses. The region accounts for over half of the world's absolute poor. They are the most vulnerable, and disasters can destroy their meager assets and income. The poorest populations cannot use savings or assets to cope with unforeseen adversity. After a disaster, the poorer households face a range of challenges linked to reduced food availability, children being forced to no longer attend school, and the forced sale of assets occurs to meet the immediate needs. These disproportionate impacts widen socioeconomic disparities exacerbate existing inequalities, and trap people in poverty from one generation to the next. The report highlights each disaster in the region leads to 0.13 point increase in the Gini coefficient. Interactions between disasters, poverty, and inequality can exacerbate economic conditions and social fault lines, which aggravate social exclusion and create fertile ground for conflict. My third point is that climate variability is exacerbating disaster risks. The frequency and characteristics of hazards are changing due to climate change. This makes traditional risk analysis difficult and insufficient. Using climate scenarios in 2030, the APDR shows that many buildings and critical infrastructure will have to cope with conditions that will be radically different. Climate risk scenarios also warn of considerable future uncertainties due to an alarming geographical shift in drought risk in South Asia and Southeast Asia, as well as an increase in the intensity of tropical cyclones in the Pacific. The flood risk in transboundary river basins of the region is likely to increase 2 to 6 times under moderate and severe climate scenarios. To respond to these challenges, ESCAP's work offers a set of possible policy approaches and responses. Today, I would like to focus on 2 policy responses, as I mentioned earlier, which through regional cooperation should be scaled up to support the region's resilience. We should continue to invest in regional early warning systems that serve as a public good, of which the benefits cut across borders. Countries should take advantage of the rapid innovations in space applications. ESCAP's Regional Space Applications Program for Sustainable Development in Asia and the Pacific supports low-capacity, high-risk countries to enhance their access to space-based data for disaster risk reduction. Countries can also invest in building capacities to effectively use improved models and technologies in climate science forecasting. The recently established Asia-Pacific Center for Disaster Information Management will provide member countries with advisory services and technical cooperation on transboundary disasters such as earthquake, drought, and sand and dust storms. With sufficient funding, the ESCAP Trust Fund on Tsunami, Disaster, and Climate Preparedness will continue to promote multi-hazard early warning systems and deepen regional cooperation in anticipatory policy actions, including innovative financing for disaster risk reduction. We should enhance the ongoing dialogue in Asia-Pacific region on exploring new innovations in risk transfer mechanisms. Early warning systems, while necessary, are not enough to rapidly counteract the impacts of disasters. Developing cost-effective financing is needed to decrease the existing resilience gaps. Parametric insurance solutions are a good example of cost-effective vehicles for mitigating disaster losses. Yet, because payouts are based on threshold triggers, scaled-up adoption across the region will require considerable investment to improve accuracy and standardization of hazard risk data. Regional catastrophic risk pools have proven to be an attractive and cost-effective strategy to cover disaster risk exposure in other parts of the world. But these mechanisms remain underexploited in our region. The absence of an institutionalized insurance culture and inadequate post-disaster financing threatens our economic and development achievements. Promoting deeper collaboration among countries in the region on disaster risk financing is an ESCAP priority. To conclude, the story of disasters in our region is of shockingly high levels of damage and loss of life. But it is also one of a region using measures such as risk-sensitive investments, disaster risk transfer mechanisms, resilient infrastructure, and better preparedness initiatives. Going forward, we cannot lose this momentum. This Committee of ESCAP offers a platform to strengthen existing mechanisms and research for disaster risk reduction, to systematically use all the tools, innovations, and technological advances available at our disposal. I propose establishing an Asia-Pacific disaster resilience network that can bring together all elements of ESCAP's current and future work in this area in a coherent manner. It will support the implementation of ESCAP's regional roadmap on the SDGs and help prepare the next Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which will be held in March 2018. As we strive to implement the Sustainable Development Goals in the region, let us take full advantage of the Asia-Pacific Disaster Resilience Network to support the ongoing efforts of ESCAP, its partners, and the member states. As the regional arm of the United Nations, ESCAP stands ready to provide its multilateral platform to share knowledge, promote capacity building, engage in substantive policy dialogue, and build consensus on the way forward towards our common goals. I'd like to emphasize again, disaster risk reduction in Asia-Pacific is inextricably linked with sustainable development. The convergence of the global agendas offers us unprecedented opportunities towards building resilience in the region. My hope is that this meeting will represent an important step in our collective journey towards a future where sustainable development and disaster risk reduction are addressed in a holistic, integrated manner. I look forward to the outcomes of your deliberations and wish you a successful session. Thank you for being here and look forward to your ideas and support going forward in this very critical area. Thank you to everybody for being here.
I would like to thank Dr. Akhtar for welcome remarks. And now I would like to invite His Excellency, Police Lieutenant General Nadipet Sadiwang, Vice Minister, Interior, Royal Thai Government, to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Thailand. It is my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Thailand, the host government, to this fifth session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction at ESCAP. I would like to express my great appreciation to ESCAP for organizing this timely meeting. With the economic cost of disasters on the rise all over the world, the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction is an important forum for member states in Asia-Pacific to share experiences and to jointly identify effective practices and solutions. Excellencies, the news channels and social media have relayed the devastation from the aftermath of hurricanes that made landfall in parts of the Caribbean and the United States. We are also concerned by the images of the looming volcanic eruption threatening our close neighbor. Over 100,000 people evacuated their villages in Bali, Indonesia, while Vanuatu, further afield, is dealing with the same threat. These are just a few stark reminders of the potentially devastating effects triggered by natural hazards. Like many other member states across the Asia-Pacific region, Thailand is regularly exposed to heavy accumulated impacts from natural disasters, both large and small, as illustrated by the severe flooding experienced in the south of my country in May and in the northeast in August of this year. On the 2nd of August 2017, at least 10 provinces, mostly in the northeast, were affected by floods and flash floods. With all this worrying news, let me take this opportunity to compliment ESCAP on its 2017 edition of the Asia-Pacific Disaster Report, which, as I understand, will be launched at this session by ESCAP Executive Secretary Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. I have had the opportunity to review its key findings, and I can say that Thailand shares the concern that disaster risk is a dynamic phenomenon and that managing such risk is increasingly complex. We do agree that disaster risk is outpacing resilience, but we also share the hope that innovative technologies and advances in science will give us the tools that will ensure we leave no one behind as we move up the development ladder. This knowledge product will be of immense value for the countries in our region. While many disasters are unpredictable, many can be anticipated. And Thailand is prioritizing investments in measures that strengthen resilience, particularly in our most vulnerable communities in rural areas. We are also making sure that such efforts are fully integrated into longer-term development plans. Earlier this year, during the 73rd ESCAP Commission session, Mongolia and Thailand joined efforts by putting forward the ESCAP Commission's Resolution 73/7 on enhancing regional cooperation for the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030 in Asia and the Pacific. It invites ESCAP member states, together with its development partners, to enhance the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030 and relevant initiatives, including the Bangkok Principles for the implementation of the health aspects of the Sendai Framework. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, regarding regional collaboration on early warning, Thailand is an active member of both the ESCAP, the WMO Typhoon Committee, and the WMO ESCAP panel on tropical cyclones. My government is pleased that an effort is underway to strengthen collaboration between these two platforms through multi-hazard synergized standard operating procedures. With financial support from the ESCAP Multi-Donor Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster and Climate Preparedness in Indian Ocean and Southeast Asian countries, My government helped create the Trust Fund for Tsunami, Disaster and Climate Preparedness in 2005 through a founding contribution of 10 million US dollars. And we believe that it focused on strengthening early warning systems for coastal hazards is as relevant as ever, taking into account the additional risks brought about by climate change. The Trust Fund has demonstrated how it can promote regional cooperation in the field of disaster risk reduction through multi-hazard early warning systems. Such systems are an essential component of disaster preparedness and save lives. At this point, I would like to invite you to join us in supporting the multi-donor trust fund, either financially or in kind, to continue its work as strengthening the capacity of Asia-Pacific countries to respond to disasters and pave the way for a sustainable future. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to realize the ambitious global goals on sustainable development and disaster risk reduction, we need to mainstream disaster resilience into national development policies as well as other sectoral policies, and therefore we need to involve all parties concerned at the levels of both the government and the UN system. It is clear that at the regional level, the United Nations systems and regional commissions have a significant role to play in creating, enabling policy frameworks and promoting collaboration across specialized agencies, especially in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction best practices, strengthening early warning system, providing clear framework and technical guidelines for scaling up innovations and tested approaches. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of cooperation and with the strong belief that the outcome of this committee meeting will contribute to the strengthening of resilience across the region, I wish you successful deliberations during this 5th Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction. Thank you.
I would like to thank His Excellency Police Lieutenant General Nadipit Sadiwong, Vice Minister for Interior, Royal Thai Government, for his opening remarks. I would now like to invite Mr. Mohammed Idris Masood, member of the National Disaster Management Authority from the Government of Pakistan, to deliver the keynote speech on behalf of His Excellency Lieutenant General Omar Mahmood Hayat, who unfortunately has been delayed. Thank you.
Her Excellency, Madam Shamshad Akhtar, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary ESCAP, His Excellency the Vice Minister for Interior, Kingdom of Thailand, delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning. At the outset, let me express our heartiest felicitations to the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific for organizing 5th session of the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction and for being able to continuously provide leadership to the agenda of resilience in the region. We in Pakistan seek inspiration and guidance from ESCAP's good work to create an atmosphere for resilience building in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may be aware, Pakistan, due to its diverse topographical and demographic settings, is vulnerable to a host of natural and human-induced hazards, hydrometeorological disasters in the country, mostly induced by climate change phenomena, have not only become more unpredictable, but their frequency has increased manifold. The economic and social losses caused by these disasters in Pakistan run into billions of dollars. We have incurred losses to the tune of $18 billion since 2010 due to floods alone. In the wake of disasters, as a normal practice and out of compulsion, the government diverts development funds and precious resources for relief, response, and subsequently for reconstruction of damaged infrastructure and facilities. This is what Pakistan also had to do in the wake of 2005 earthquake and floods 2010 and afterwards. After having experienced recurrent disasters, we shifted our focus towards disaster risk reduction and preparedness. We established institutional mechanisms in the form of National Disaster Management Authority and similar structures at provincial and local levels. To be able to systematically address our emerging challenges, in line with our national and international obligations, we formulated national policy documents and implementation frameworks, including National DRR policy and National Disaster Management Plan for a 10 years prospective period, to provide direction and guidance to all stakeholders for effective DRR-related interventions in the country. Implementation of the plan has been started and national-level roadmap for NDMP has since been formulated and shared with all relevant stakeholders for compliance. We have already completed macro-level risk assessment of entire country, while we are now going for GIS-based micro-level multi-hazard vulnerability assessments down to the Union Council level. 5 districts have already been completed. I would also like to express our desire to share our experiences with the member countries utilizing the platform of ESCAP. We are also working on developing risk financing mechanisms and disaster insurance mechanisms. We have also developed national framework for micro-level insurance mechanism for the insurance industry to follow and seek guidance from. We have also created a dedicated gender and child cell to take care of vulnerable segments of population during disaster risk reduction, policy formulation, and disaster response. Pakistan has initiated implementation of Sendai framework for action, and first country DRM status report has already been submitted to UNISDR, highlighting the progress achieved so far under its priority actions. NDMA Pakistan remained part of various activities related to disaster management, including 6th Ministerial Conference on DRR, 3rd World Conference on DRR, Regional Consultative Committee meetings on DRR. It hosted International Conference on sharing experience and developing regional hazard and risk picture, and has hosted 3 meetings of regional technical groups of disaster management confidence building measures under the Istanbul process Heart of Asia. Similarly, we believe there is a need for stronger and active cooperation within the neighborhood and among the regional countries. Ladies and gentlemen, as already underscored, we highly appreciate UNESCAP's role for addressing regional needs and challenges and ensuring coherence by bringing together mechanisms and initiatives. We hope that ESCAP's efforts will further strengthen to regional knowledge sharing mechanism. We have firm belief that the multi-sectoral platform to support DRR will bring harmony and synergies in our actions at regional level that would ultimately be contributing to global good. Early warning system is most important within the regional perspective and needs due consideration in Asia and the Pacific region due to the frequent hydrometeorological disasters and increasing vulnerabilities recreated by the climate change impacts. It will enhance the capabilities of countries in the region for effective response to any disasters. NDMA completely supports ESCAP's initiatives for developing strategies and mechanisms for cooperation and disaster risk reduction at regional level. We also appreciate the innovative step by establishment of Disaster Information Center in Iran and hope to work with the center for creating decision support systems, risk knowledge mechanisms, and look forward to Asian Disaster Report 2007, which we understand will serve as an eye-opener to the regional countries and DRR community, and it will further strengthen our resolve to move ahead for resilience in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, disasters, as we say, do not have borders, and many occur in any part of the region. Therefore, strong regional cooperation in Asia and the Pacific is essential for mitigating diverse effects of disasters. In addition to establishment of regional early warning system mechanism, it is essential to enable the regional countries to respond effectively to disaster situation, which will save, besides building economic and social resilience, save lives besides building economic and social resilience to disasters at sub-national, national, regional, and global levels. Disaster statistics and historical data at regional level is of due importance for knowledge sharing. Therefore, Pakistan supports the idea of regional database of disaster statistics for more ground situation compliant disaster risk reduction. Pakistan is ensuring consolidation of past experiences and existing capacities of all institutions to meet entire spectrum of disaster management in competing resource-constrained environment through a comprehensive, professional, and proactive approach to meet the desired end in the state's defined National Disaster Management Plan and policy, in alignment with SFDRR 2015-2030. We hope to receive continued enhanced support from our regional friends and development partners, particularly from ESCAP, in our aim of making Pakistan a resilient country that is also able to positively contribute to the resilient region. I thank you all.
I would like to thank Mr. Mohammed Idris Masood, a member of the National Disaster Management Authority from the Government of Pakistan, for his keynote speech. And now I would like to invite Ms. Tiziana Bonaparte, Director of the Information, Communication, Technology and Disaster Risk Reduction Division, to introduce the key findings of the 2017 edition of ESCAP's biannual Asia-Pacific Disaster Report. The theme of this edition is Leave No One Behind. ESCAP also likes to take the opportunity to welcome our media representatives to this event. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The SDGs have a critical stipulation: leave no one behind. And this has particular resonance for disaster management, since it means breaking the nexus between disasters, poverty, conflict, and inequality. This year's Asia-Pacific Disaster Report examines and analyzes what this means in practice. And so I would like this morning, very briefly, to highlight 6 key messages from the report and to provide you with some of the statistical and anecdotal evidence that has emerged from our research. So the first message, as the Excellencies have mentioned this morning, disaster risk is outpacing resilience. And when we look at the statistics, we see that Asia-Pacific accounts for around 60% of the global population, but it accounts for 88% of the people affected by disasters. And since 1970, more than 2 million people have died due to disasters, and this is around 57% of the global death toll. Economic costs are on the rise, and they are rising faster in Asia-Pacific as compared to the rest of the world. The blue dotted trend line shows a faster increase as compared to the red dotted line for the rest of the globe. And these figures are as percentages of GDP. The second message is that hazards are intensifying with transboundary geographic shifts. And I'd like to highlight 3 key hazards: tropical cyclones, floods, and droughts. All 3 are hazards that can be anticipated, and they are hazards where damages are most avoidable. In terms of tropical cyclones, we see increasing complexity. Tropical cyclones have shorter and shorter return periods, with increasing storm surges and wind speeds. The track of tropical cyclones may shift eastwards and may shift northwards in the West and North Pacific Basin. This implies that more than 3 times the number of people and economic assets of these regions will be exposed to tropical cyclones. Several of Asia's large megacities and special economic zones are along this shifting track of tropical cyclones. Similarly, for transboundary flooding, we can expect flood losses to increase by 2 to 6 times in all of the major river basins of the region. China, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan will experience 2 to 3 times more in flood losses than in the past. And when we look at drought, we see an intensification of drought severity. Here again, there will be shifts in the geography of drought. In South Asia, there will be a move towards the west, and in Southeast Asia, the track is more shifting towards the east. And the implication of this is that the drought risks will emerge in areas that do not have significant experience in managing droughts in recent history. So the management of the risk is not only dynamic, but it is increasingly complex. The third message is that disasters intensify poverty traps. Disasters keep people in poverty, they push people back into poverty, and they transmit poverty intergenerationally. And this is principally because a $1 loss in assets results in a much larger loss for the well-being of the poor as compared to the well-being of the wealthy. And as an example, we have taken the primary school enrollment rates in Pakistan after major flooding events. And after the after flooding and earthquake. So after the 2005 earthquake, we see a sharp drop in the primary enrollment rate. And then we see it recover, and then it is hit again by floods that appeared in quick succession in 2010 and 2011. And once again, we see a drop in the enrollment rate, and we see it taking much longer to rise again. So the impacts following quick succession disasters are longer lasting, and the impacts of decreases in school enrollment rates decimate a community's prospects for better employment and for the intergenerational opportunities of escaping the poverty trap. My fourth message is that disasters and worsening inequalities are associated. Worldwide, studies have shown that disasters are positively related to higher inequality, and a natural disaster can increase the Gini coefficient for income equality by 0.01 percentage points at the global level. At the regional level, our research estimates that this number is around 0.13 in the region. And when we look at the situation in urban centers, we see that urban centers, megacities that are at extreme disaster risk are also those that experience higher inequalities. And megacities that have a lower disaster risk are also the cities where there is less inequality. And this is a map that shows that most of these extreme high-risk areas are along coastlines, And they are also the areas where we can expect in future that there will be a 50% rise in population over the next decade, over the next SDG implementation period. So this really means the exposure of much larger segments of the population to extremely vulnerable and hazard-prone megacities. The fifth message is that disasters and conflict compound risks. On the left-hand side of the screen, you have a mapping of the risk hotspots, and on the right-hand screen, you see the risk profiles of countries as measured by the Inform Risk Index, which is a UN multi-agency index that identifies the Asia-Pacific countries where conflict and disaster risk coexist and where the conditions of high or very high risk are acute. And while conflict does not necessarily create disasters, and while disasters do not necessarily create conflicts, when they do coexist, they can create complex and converging crises. And this is typically after an unstable economic condition that can exacerbate or heighten social inclusion, which creates a fertile ground for conflict. It can be due to competition for natural resources, along with environmental stresses and mismanagement. And conflicts also undermine the capacity and commitment of states to prevent and respond to natural disasters. And so there is the potential for a vicious circle to be triggered. And so we have looked at pathways to prevention, and we have proposed, within the context of a macroeconomic stable environment, programmatic areas where interventions can be made to address and to break the potential for the conflict and multiple crisis nexus. And these interventions are on the economic side, on the social side, and on the environmental and disaster resilience areas as well. And the final message is that there is tremendous scope to retool and relearn disaster risk reduction through regional cooperation. We have heard many times disasters have no borders. Regional cooperation can augment the impacts of our interventions. We have the guiding framework provided by the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is matched by further actions that our member states have agreed to under the regional roadmap for implementing the 2030 agenda, in which disaster risk reduction and resilience is a common theme and priority area identified. And so the report calls for action at the regional level in 3 areas that can give us high dividends. One is in the maintenance of the regional's early warning systems. Secondly, in the sharing of data and knowledge, and here innovations in space applications, for example, are opening up a huge array of non-conventional data, knowledge, and information that will be of particular importance for the high-risk, low-capacity countries, and to really enable the achievement of the full scope of these tools building regional capacity will remain one of the pillars of our interventions. So let us work together to leave no one behind by 2030. Thank you.
On behalf of all of the distinguished delegates present at this committee session, I would like to thank Ms. Bonaparte for this most insightful presentation. I would now like to invite Dr. Akhtar to present copies of the Asia-Pacific Disaster Report 2017 to the dignitaries at the rostrum. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our opening session. We shall now adjourn. Heads of all delegations are invited to join ESCAP's Executive Secretary, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, for a group photograph. The group photo will be taken at the stairs between Committee Room 3 and 4. All other delegates are invited for a 15-minute refreshments break. At 10:15, we shall proceed with the next item on our agenda, which is agenda item 2, election of officers. All delegates kindly remain seated while the dignitaries leave the rostrum. Thank you.
Are you sure? Okay.